I was a trailbreaker in many therapies. We have taken Crayon, holding therapy, ABA, we have added sensory practices, sound, stentorium, sound therapy, speech therapies. We have also replaced them with speech leader therapy, microcrown therapy, Atlant correction. We've turned to Debbie through Skype. We've practiced Matis and it didn't help. How do domestic animals benefit people? Give milk. Who gives milk? Cow. And goats give wool. Hello. This is an unusual interview with the mother of autistic child. This is a brief encyclopedia of methods of work with autism. Here mother shares her own experience, the methods which work and which don't. What have provided the improvement and the reasons of backlashes? Hello, Natalia. Tell us about yourself, your story. How did it start? What happened to Maxim? What were the symptoms? My name is Natalia, my son's name is Maxim. A lot of people know us because of Stop Autism. My child is 9 now. That is, we have come a long way. We were diagnosed when Maxim was 2 and received a disability certificate when he was 3. And this year they officially cancelled, or better to say, they didn't confirm an autism diagnosis. And they diagnosed him with development delay. He still has speech and emotional delay, but this was before infodiving, and now Maxim is doing great. And everything is getting better every day. That's why I'm very grateful to infodivers, to Natalia, that Maxim is making me happy every day. And I can say that days of autism are over for us. And I'm grateful to share this knowledge because people know us. We are not just a random family with a random child for people. We have a lot of photos and a lot of videos, and I want to share this information with other mothers, to share this hope, this desire to help your child and yourself. I can tell how it all started, although there is a lot of information in our blog. Now it is difficult to remember, as so many years have passed, so much has happened during these years, but I also watched your videos and I remember how difficult it was. Maxim is our first child. We didn't expect anything bad to happen. He was developing according to his age, I can say. And when he was a year and a half, he was vaccinated with DTP and polio. Inexplicably, they made both of them at the same day. And since the day he stopped walking, he had pain in his leg and he sat in his stroller. And that's how our story got started. I didn't blame the vaccination, but maybe it gave an impulse to backlash. His development abruptly turned around and he began to lose what he had already had. And by the time when he turned 2, everything he could do had gone. There were a lot of signs, that's why we quickly understood that something was wrong with him. He was our first child, but nevertheless we began to worry when he was 2. Maxim was behaving strange. And in fact, I was glad to know that his condition had a name. Because I already began to think that he had some psyche problems or something like that. And since he turned 2, we began to fight, and I had a relief when he was diagnosed. I didn't feel any blues or blahs. Instead, I turned my sleeves and began to deal with it. Maxim began to have some little changes, and this kept me going. And it is written in our blog, and in fact, we have tried a lot of things during these years. I think everything that exists in the world of autism, we have tried everything. Please tell us, what were the symptoms at the beginning? He didn't walk, he refused to leave the stroller, he stopped being interested in the things which kids usually like. He lost his interest, he stopped paying attention to animals. And little kids usually love cats, dogs, birds. He was sitting in his stroller with switched-off look behind his eyes. He had never had a pointing gesture, he never spoken, even before vaccination. But he was developing anyway, he used to smile. And after this, it was impossible to drag him out of the stroller. He began to shout right in the stroller. He was not interested in the playground. He was playing only with the stones, rocks, or even the cars. The cars, he liked watching the road and riding cars. He enjoyed this bustling and the doors, elevators, moving messages, sign, house, intercom. These were the only things which attracted him outside. Neither signs, no slides, nothing. He was walking meaninglessly. Even if he climbed out of his stroller, he was walking in slow distraction, pointlessly. This frightened me a lot. And in fact, at the time, I was in such a state, maybe it was my feeling of fault that I'm not able to spur him to activity. Why doesn't he want to interact with me? I think with the world. At some moment I also felt offended at his behavior, and I at some point left him alone. You don't have to if you don't want. It had been a severe aggression for him till he turned 2.5. He began to have steaming the veins when he was about 2 years old. He waved his hands, he piled his toys, he didn't play with them in the usual way, he just gathered them in a row. For example, he put the cars in a row, the toy rings. He used to take bath a lot, up to 5 times a day, and consequently he watched cartoons. Nothing else interested him. As to food, he changed his diet. That is, he stopped trying new things. Thus, he had somehow limited his diet, and he didn't expand it for a long time. He continued to eat fruits he used to like, but he doesn't eat vegetables all these years. That is why we gave him vitamins, because his diet is quite poor. And of course, speech therapists, he didn't speak at all. But he had lost the ability to understand speech. We had practiced with him before he turned 1. And we have video where he understands everything, cards, colors, speech. After he turned 1.5, almost to 2, he also began to attend kindergarten, and this was like a red flag for me, because it was impossible not to notice how much he differed from the other kids. That is, he was my first child, but nevertheless, when I came to the kindergarten, I saw the children his age and who were totally different. Maxim was playing alone, he played not with toys, he either clattered or shoved something away. He was obsessed with shoving things under the sofa, under the blanket. He was trying to shove himself away all the time. But all this happened separately from the others. He started to walk in the kindergarten when he was 1 year and 9, and he didn't understand his name. He stopped responding to his name, and the kindergarten was a constant stress. They made me remarks all the time that I didn't teach him, didn't engage him. They even threw out a hint that we were alcoholics. Otherwise, why our kid didn't know how to use the bathroom and what a potty chair was. And he really didn't comprehend what a potty chair was up very long, up to 2.5 years, and we were able to teach him using a potty chair only through training, only through ABA method. When he was 2.5, before he has 2, he hadn't even had a chance. He couldn't understand even himself, his name. He had lost the ability to comprehend speech, oral speech. That is, he stopped gaining orientation in his environment. He acted according to a situation. That is, we come to the kitchen, Maxim sit down, he sat, he could eat by himself and drink, but his motor skills were almost all right. He had one more symptom, and we used to have such a classic bunch of symptoms. He used to have sensory defect in his body. He didn't notice how he had burned himself with an iron. He had blisters, and he didn't say a word. I could notice those blisters when he woke up in a couple of hours after we went to sleep. His pain limit wasn't all right, and he used to follow the same routes. He was obsessed with it. He was crying a lot. He was simply shouting day and night during this period without stopping. It was impossible to comfort him. He refused physical contact, and I was also offended and tired. It was autumn. We existed in one apartment, but he was on his own. We were on our own. And he started walking his roots. It was impossible to walk a different road with him, either to the shop or along the familiar route. And that is why we used a stroller for so long, because it was very difficult to carry a crying child all the time. What else? There was a whole bunch of symptoms. His sensitivity was absent, yes. His ears, he began to close his ears to pronounce sounds, which deaf and mute people usually say. And the only thing the doctors did, they hinted at that he wasn't able to hear. And there was no other help with them. All of them said that everything was fine because of his medical story. It was mentioned that the pregnancy and delivery were fine. And they told me, everything is fine. You haven't complained, everything is great, and speech is the least important thing. And I felt that something was wrong, but I couldn't explain what exactly. We visited audiologist, passed all the tests, everything was fine, but during this period he started behaving inadequately in the official institutions. He wasn't able to wait, he didn't understand the situation, that he had us to show his nose, mouth, or whatever at all. He was crying, running away. I was running after him. I was sitting in these hospitals in lines, and I had to catch him for 100 times. He ran away in the street, on the road. He didn't have the sense of danger at all. And he had also become very clumsy. That is, a walking child began to stumble, to fall down. Even such a small agent like this, he stepped on it and fall down at once. Thus he couldn't descend. And we have a lot of photos where his face is injured. I couldn't keep up with him. It seemed that he already knew how to do all things, and he was walking without watching where I stepped. And it was very challenging to watch him at that period, because he was totally losing the skills we had already had. Such a list. And I began to search on the internet. My husband went away on business, and those days I couldn't have a break from him, as we had used to take care of him in church with my husband. It didn't seem to be that bad. And then he flied away on business. Maxim stayed with me, and I began to film everything. And in the evening he went to sleep. I rewatched those videos, and I realized that something was really wrong with him, that a child couldn't act like that. That he was lying all day long, pushing the toy cars in front of his eyes, and his eyes changed. He began to squint his eyes. And he also started to laugh at nothing. This scared me a lot. That I was pushing the stroller where there was the world around us, the birds were singing, and he was laughing at nothing. I searched on the internet, laughing at nothing, waving hands like winds, and I came across autism. I'm working in the state establishment outpatient psychiatric child clinic. Of course, people don't reach us at once. The mom, Natalia, has described a lot of symptoms which match the diagnosis of autism. And more often, parents addressed to the private psychologists, attend private clinics, and they come to us when they are already desperate or when they need to solve some problems. As to the child's occupational history, where to refer a child for treatment, to which establishment, and according to which program. I closed the medical websites at once. They said it was incurable, and I wasn't comfortable with this. And then I entered the Biomed's website. Biomed itself frightened me a lot. I was reading and feeling that it wasn't our story, that I wouldn't be able to medicate my child who had never taken a pill in his life. He had only been vaccinated, and that's all. All these tons of synthetic vitamins, nutritional supplements, it wasn't our way. But nevertheless, there were happy stories on this side, that the kids were getting better, that they began to speak. So this wave of desperation didn't cover me then, because I saw that other kids could start speaking at 5, so mine would also start. That other kids started to attend school, so mine would also go to school. Some kids are very irritable, inflammable. They affect on a suggestion to play with them, particularly when you offer them the tasks. They don't want to do them. And in this case, some doctors prescribe medicine. Very often, autistic children are prescribed with such a drug, Rispalept. It's neuroleptic. A lot of parents agree on medical treatment because of being desperate. But the mother Natalia, after she had studied the problem and read a lot of information on different websites, she had chosen behavior therapy, ABA, and she had reached pretty good results. And we began to try different things. We gave him Quran for a while. We tried to keep the diet. He felt better, and this gave me strength to move on. The types of therapy were changing in course of time. We tried some new things, and each of the pieces of this puzzle had brought something new to our lives. Some therapies didn't help at all. But I don't regret this long journey, because my child was making progress all the time. But when I went through 2 more crises despite his improvements, when he turned 5, his speech was far from standard. He started to speak when he was 3.5. He wasn't able to start talking due to listening. That is, he couldn't comprehend speech. Thus, we were diagnosed with alalia and classic Carnage syndrome. By the time he had been already considered disabled, and he couldn't understand the words. That is why he couldn't start talking. I practiced with him in different ways. We engaged him to pronounce vowels and some consonants. I wrote all of them down. I was happy for each letter, but he wasn't able to talk anyway, because he couldn't understand what he had to say. He was hearing everything like under the water, at least it seemed like that. He was trying to comprehend, but he couldn't hear the word, so he couldn't repeat it. And we began practicing according to the Doman method with cards, and he learned how to read. He learned how to read when he was 3. And when he was 3.5, he was able to talk with the help of these cards. That is, I showed him the card with the word, and he says ear, maybe not very distinctive, but moon, moon. Thus he began to repeat. It was a huge breakthrough, but nothing had changed by the time he turned 5. Although we had passed several auditory therapies and he began to hear, he wasn't still able. I don't even talk about fluent speech now. It seemed to be as far as the moon. He wasn't still able to shift from echo. That is, Maxim wants to drink. I say, Maxim, give me drink. And he used to repeat word by word after me, Mom, give drink. Say, Mom, give drink. So it was such a kind of speech that if he hadn't been told what to say, he would say anything at all. But he could read. If you showed him a card, rhinoceros, he would say rhinoceros. That's all. That is, he had gathered thousands. By the age of 5, he had thousands of words, but he wasn't able to form even a request out of those words. His requests were only formulaic and only with the help of my hints. I was training him like a dog. For example, I hold a raisin and said, give me raisin. And he repeated, give me raisin. But this wasn't a victory. When he turned 5, I had a crisis. So many things seemed to be done. He started attending kindergarten and he seemed to be learning new things, but his speech wasn't speech at all. It was just an echo. Although comparing to other kids who hadn't begun to speak, of course it was a victory. I had nothing to complain about. That's why I decided to keep on working. I was sad for a while because his speech hadn't turned on like this, but what could we do? By the time Maxim turned 3.5, our second child was born. And I had to leave Maxim alone, so to say. I had a constant feeling of guilt because I thought I had to give all my attention to Maxim. And I was taking care of my other baby. It seemed that I had to give him more attention. And when he was 5, we involved speech therapies, but it was a drop in the ocean. But I regret the most not the therapies which we had tried, because they at least given us a chance. That it is, I didn't know whether they would help us or not. I just tried. I was a trailblazer in many therapies, and I shared this in my blog at once. Please tell us in details, what did you start with? Which therapies have you tried? Which of them provided the results? At first we took Creon and kept the diet. And it turned out it didn't work for us. That is, he felt better, but I thought it was necessary to change his food ration, to give more useful food and less junk food, and this would provide 80% of result, and I was satisfied. We cancelled the diet because I considered that his body had to get used to everything at first, and at second that it wasn't the way out just to put a lock on the fridge. Simply more useful food, less junk food, and it was such a compromise for me at that point. The first therapy which helped me a lot was holding therapy, just because it was such a period for me when I felt some guilt and some rejection to Maxim, that he wasn't perfect, wasn't the child I had been dreaming about. That we had those difficulties, and this therapy helped because we just hugging. We were hugging for hours every day, and I had to learn how to comfort him. At first he was crying, tried to sleep out, but I had to learn to console him. When he was leaving, when he regressed, I was also tired, and I said, okay, fine, leave. If you don't want to communicate, we won't. And holding therapy helped us to bring back some togetherness, that I'm not afraid of you, I love you, that I will save you. That was the message when we were hugging. And several times my husband also hugged him. We practiced this every day. Sometimes he did this instead of me. It also helped him to stop being afraid of his nervous crises, because those hysterics, they used to be very severe. That is, he was trying to get what he wanted. As any other kids, or even healthy kids, they try to get what they want. And in case of autistic children, sometimes it can go beyond all the bounds if parents don't know how to create these bounds. Holding therapy helped me to accept that my child didn't want to, or wasn't able to, or to learn how to tell him no, to comfort him in different ways. Look, there is a bird. I sang for him. It took several hours, and I had a whole plan. I put a list in front of me. We used to listen to Железnova's songs. He was 2, and it seemed that we were returning to the time when he was 1, and started from the beginning. Nursery rhymes, songs, patty cake, and it was very helpful. I practiced this for long, I guess for about 8 months, and I followed this therapy because it helped. After it, Maxim looked at my eyes, and these were the first times when he made eye contact with me. Because we had lost this skin-to-skin contact with him, and it appeared again only during holding. That is, this all disappeared. He used to sleep in his stroller because he wasn't able to sleep in our arms. Once we took a flight on a plane. It was when he was 1 year and 9, and it was horrible. I remember it like a nightmare. He was shouting. It took 6 hours to fly to Hurghada, and he was shouting all these 6 hours without stopping because he wasn't able to fall asleep in my arms. He didn't need me. He wanted his blanket, I don't know. He didn't want to stay in my knees. He was tearing himself away, and people looked at me and maybe they thought that he wasn't my baby. He fell asleep only when we descended, and finally I was carrying him in my arms, his stroller, the suitcase. I traveled with my friend without my husband. This was a very illustrative moment to explain how bad he used to feel. And even at the seaside, as we traveled to the seaside, I have a lot of pictures where Maxim feels bad. That is the sun, the sea, children. At the seaside are usually learning new things. My second child, when we went to the seaside for the first, second, third time, his speech developed. He had a lot of emotions. And Maxim, he was lying all the time. He lied on the ground. I have millions of these photos where he is staring nowhere, when he is walking nowhere. That was our vacation. It was extremely difficult. I was alone with him. He fell down from the chair, that is, he couldn't understand at all where he was and what for. I was just moving him in his stroller. And at the seaside, this was terrible. Now, when I have kids, I never even have an idea to turn on cartoons for them at the seaside. And Maxim, at the seaside, instead of swimming, playing, nothing was interesting for him. I simply turned on cartoons for him on the phone, because I also needed some rest, to have a break, simply to eat. Nothing was interesting for him at all. There were a lot of cats, there are many of them in Egypt. He wasn't interested. So such little things, and at the time I didn't know yet. And when we came back, I was looking through the photos and I realized once again that it shouldn't be like this. That 1 and 9-year-old child is not interested in anything, that he was lying and doing nothing. As to the therapies, holding was helpful, ABA therapy helped, at least he had learned to do something. I was really missing sharing with my husband his success, to tell him that he learned to do this and that. And this point up, ABA helped, because I had taught him colors, shapes, lotto, together cards. That is, we practice ABA 5 times a day for 40 minutes. I had a bucket, so you put the jigsaw, here you are, have a raising, show the cat card. He showed, gather the shape sorter, he did, and the same every day. And he got used to that. We have this 5 times a day, and in general he liked schedules. So we practice ABA 5 times a day, and of course he had learned a lot of things, colors and so on, but there was no speech. And he didn't know how to use the potty chair. He had learned to juxtapose things, his logical thinking has turned on a little bit. And at the time, this also gave me strength, that he was clever, that he could do anything, that he was just far away. And this helped him not to start doing some wrong things, because he was occupied 5 times a day and he liked it. He was even waiting for it. He began to have progress. We had learned nose, belly button, those things which kids usually learn at 1.5, he was able to learn at 2.5. So we practiced this. This is, there was one period of holding therapy, everyday nursery rhymes, songs and so on, and these classes. And at the weekend we had a rest. We practiced this only the weekdays instead of kindergarten. We didn't attend it because there was no sense in kindergarten at the time. He didn't need, the other kids, all the nursery teachers told him off, and they were also trying to offend us as parents, to tell they were doing something wrong. That's why we just took him home from the kindergarten, filled the temporary termination application, but we never came back to that kindergarten. And for a long time, until the second child was born, we hadn't attended kindergarten and we were studying at home. We practiced in the bathroom. We added some sensory activities, sands, swings, through the physical development, like hand barrow exercise, when we hold his legs and make him walk. We were engaging him all the time. While he was the only child, we occupied him. He was shouting, even when he got more or less better, a new problem had appeared in the car. I think this was Dad who said in one of the movies that his child was going mad in the car. I had never seen such a terrible behavior as my child had when he was 3, when we were going somewhere by car. For example, my husband turned aside and Maxim went crazy. He was fastened with the seat belts and he began to hit his head on everything, on the walls, because we have changed the route. And how did we change it? Where had we to go? And this was going on until he was 4. That was how the change of a route influenced him. And when he already could talk, he also cried and said we took the wrong way. Somehow it was important for him, I don't know why. And he used to have this habit for quite a long time. When he turned 3, we added thorium vitamins. They helped us a lot at that time. I think he used to have some GIT disorder. He suffered from diarrhea when he was small, since he was 1. Very severe one. The doctors even wanted to place us in hospital for 20 days and I didn't give my consent. For 20 days we even had to stop giving him dairy products because his bowel habits didn't get back to normal and it went on as it used to. So he had bowel problems, tympanitis, some red stains like diabetes, but we never found out what it was. And while taking vitamins, he became more energetic because of food. As he had some problems with fermentation, even if he had some useful food, there was no guarantee that he was able to get all the necessary elements. And I wasn't also sure that the food in our supermarkets was of high quality. For me, it was the way to be sure that Maxim had no more GIT problems and received all the necessary vitamins. That's why he continues to take Tentorium, and for me it's just a vitamin support. I don't give him pills. All my medicine box is filled with Tentorium. This is the way out for me. I don't cook any special food, I don't limit him somehow, and we just stick with an idea that the right food is useful and the wrong food we can allow it once in a while. Tentorium had interchanged everything else, and I checked the box here that I was helping my child's body to exist, and this put my mind on ease. And he went to the kindergarten when he was 3.5, as I was busy with the baby, and he went to the kindergarten. And first we went to the private one while we waited. Then we received a place in the special therapy group because of his disability, and he was attending a speech therapy group since he was 4. There were 15 kids, but he had the most difficult situation. In fact, they were just ordinary kids with some speech problems. And he attended it, and he graduated the kindergarten when he was 7. He had trouble walking, he never day slept, he had sleeping problems, but nevertheless they put up with him, they put him into bed by their side, comforted him somehow. After he turned 4, he began to have compulsive speech, some sounds, murmuring, maybe not at 4, I guess after microcurrent therapy. At 4 everything was alright. When he was about 5, I was so confident that in a little while everything would be great, only his speech was bothering me. We tried the sound therapies and they helped us a lot to attune. As he wasn't able to understand children's voices, female voices, he could understand mine, but not the other female voices of different quality. He didn't understand male voices, and the kids' voices, he used to ignore them for a very long time, as well as the kids themselves. I think he couldn't understand them because of different frequency, and therapy helped us to tune, to calibrate these channels. That is why I'm grateful for this therapy. For that he had a wish to hear, and he heard. And it became easier to communicate with him and to teach him. In general, there was no great changes in the picture of the world. He didn't want to study the same as before for most of the time. He became better after taking Tentorium. He began to have at least some wishes, but the main symptoms remained. He didn't have motivation, or he had weak motivation. He always needed a raising or another treat. A punishment never worked for him, because he didn't care at all whether we liked him or not, whether we would get upset or not, whether we would punish him or not. But grapes, raisin, watermelon, there is some fruits worked. So it was a training, and it worked for him. Speech therapists, we have also replaced them with speech leader therapy. He had to repeat multiple times. There was such a microphone with headphones, and thus he could hear himself. This therapy is really unique. I liked it a lot. And that is, he listened to himself through the headphones and repeated. The only thing was, when he repeated incorrectly, it wasn't accepted, and this helped to improve, to develop a little bit more correct pronunciation. That is, we have never, after worked with speech therapists, only through these programs we have reached more or less correct speech. Thus he was able to repeat whatever you want, but there was no consciousness or self-comprehension. He was able to dress himself or to take the clothes off. In the kindergarten, he didn't behave bad in the kindergarten. He was alright there, but he never left the territory. He didn't cry much, but he was lying a lot and waving hands a lot. Doors, he used to play with doors for a very, very long period of time. They allowed him to do this in the kindergarten. I have seen them. They didn't bother him, but they didn't occupy him as well. That is, he didn't take part in the educational process in the kindergarten, but nevertheless he attended it and attended for the whole day. He went for work with kids, he had meals, and that's why I was glad. It was already a lot for him, because they loved him and treated him well in the kindergarten. I'm very grateful, because I know the cases when children are expelled or even don't admit it to the kindergarten, so to say, throw obstacles in their way. But we were lucky. It was an ordinary kindergarten near our home. It was convenient for us to attend it. I think it also helped, although they didn't engage him a lot. Despite the fact that Maxim didn't complete a lot of different tasks in the kindergarten, his mother mentioned that he used to lie, to clap the doors. They didn't bother him a lot. But anyway, a kindergarten is a good way of socialization. He kept some regular hours, went for a walk with kids outside, got dressed, washed his hands. That is, anyway, he was learning some new skills of self-service. And his mother had an opportunity to take care of the household, of her second child, so the mother didn't get so exhausted. When my second child grew a little bit older, I came back to our lessons. I began to do it more often. I spent 1 hour a day on our lessons, so we were back on the rails. I added a lot of sensory activities. I don't know how helpful it was, but I was glad that he was busy, and he was busy with such useful things for his body, that he practiced on parallel bars or something like that. Maybe it didn't help, but I felt psychologically better that Maxim was going somewhere, was busy with something, and that he liked it, the most important. It was important for me when we were looking for a speech therapist that Maxim was studying, practicing and advancing, even if it was a drop in the ocean. But he was learning to interact not only with me, as I understood that the world is big. He listened to me and heard me, and he followed my words, though it always took me a lot of energy to persuade him. As he didn't have enough of his own motivation, he wanted to learn new things. At some point he began to get interested in all this kid stuff. Everything got back that he liked the circus, the shops. He was game for anything after he turned 5, and he learned to ride a kick scooter, a bicycle, and everything was very interesting for him. It was almost impossible to notice his problem from the side, but his speech proclaimed that he had some. And at 6, when we have passed microcurrent therapy, for no apparent reason, I was very afraid to do it, and for a good reason. New strange symptoms originated, compulsive speech appeared, very obvious ones, some cartoon phrases. By the age of 6, he had learned to speak in sentences, and he had begun to compose more or less correct standard sentences. He didn't try to make the sentences by himself, but he used the ready-made speech tokens which we had taught him. So we have passed 2 courses of microcurrent therapy. I didn't like the very first microcurrent therapy at once. It coincided with our vacation trip. He was already 6 years old, our youngest child was 3, and it was a terrible vacation, the worst vacation in my life, and it was even worse than when we have traveled to Egypt just in 2. It was something inexpressible. After we have passed microcurrent therapy, he was already overexcited, and we lived in one room. I had a child who wanted to sleep, and Maxim was already old enough not to sleep, and Maxim was talking non-stop. He ran off at the mouth, some cartoon phrases, some bibble-babble. We put him out to the balcony. We didn't know what else to do. We were also tired after the whole day at the beach at the seaside, and he was sitting at the balcony with smartphone and continued to clatter, to babble, yell something, and also some unconsciousness appeared. That is, he could run into traffic. That was a terrible behavior. And my younger son also had a crisis of 3 years, and they both simply ran into different directions. Oh God, it was a crazy house, but not a vacation. And then I thought for the first time that it was because of vacation. We had passed microcurrent therapy according to the individual protocol made by Vlada, and I had agreed only because of this. I was very scared of this therapy and didn't want to do it, and I had an inner feeling that it could be harmful, but Vlada had written an individual protocol for us and had said that everything would be fine, that nothing could go wrong, and I wrote her about vacation. She put my mind at ease. She said that any progress is impossible without overexcitement. She said it was the influence of our vacation and it would go away. So we have passed it for the second time, and those strange things intensified. A lot of movements appeared in his body, stimulants. It was some regression. His speech seemed to be developing, but when I looked through his photos before he was 5 years old, I really thought that he was a healthy child. I was writing in my blog that we only need to improve his speech a little bit and we will win. Our victory is obvious, so to say. And when he turned 6, I began to have panic attacks again, because where was that victory if his problem was already so obvious with the naked eye? Even people in the street began to pay attention, as he had differed from the other kids before. He seemed to be clever, conscious, he knew a lot of things, he could read since he was 5. And then everything started over again. And then 1 year later, when we have finished all the therapies, the last year when Maxim was 7, already 8, it doesn't matter. 1 year later after microcurrent therapy, I learned that they had done everything wrong, that they hadn't followed the protocol. I brought my own protocol, paid them 1,000 rubles for seance, and they hadn't checked with the protocol, connected these cathodes, anodes as they liked. They simply did this treatment session as they liked. They turned a blind eye to that my child had a particular condition, that I had brought a particular protocol, despite that we had a deal over this. But simply different nurses came and they did it as they could. And I learned about this because my friend also brought her daughter there, and the same with me, with Vlada's protocol, and she took the picture of every position of the electrode head. And when those photos reached Vlada, she was shocking herself because they totally, absolutely didn't get what they were doing. They had no idea where to put plus or minus those anodes, cathodes, and by the time I had taken my child through 2 courses of this therapy and was wondering why everything got worse. And of course, I regret this, and unfortunately there's nothing I can change about this. I can only warn the others about this microcurrent therapy, and Natalia has also said that it is quite a dangerous therapy which can be harmful. I can see that they had made harm to my son. Swimming pool was also helpful. When he was 5, Maxim went to the swimming pool. We had classes with instructors. She taught him to dive, and the breathing pause while diving helped his speech to develop. Because he didn't know how to blow out the air up to 6 years, he wasn't able to do this, and his exhale was wrong, and swimming made this easy. He enjoys water a lot and he has learned how to swim. This is also our huge victory. And the most important, that he liked it and he interacted with the instructor. So we used to go there for some time. We continued to practice with speech therapists, but I didn't think that it was helping us. I did this again not to feel myself guilty that someone else is practicing with him, that gradually he would remember at least something. I also did what I could. I used illustrative materials, always illustrative, because he didn't like auditory tasks. And when he was graduating the kindergarten at 7, this was a very emotional time for me, a pleasant one, because he had attended kindergarten and was finally graduating, and I was waiting for this, and he made me really happy. He was dancing at the prom, he was dancing with a girl, she was leading, of course. This was a girl from the parallel group. He danced all the dances, he did some movements, but she leaded him. And it seemed from the side that he was an awesome dancer, and he did this for me, and it was very pleasant. Although he wasn't ready to go to school by that time, but we graduated the kindergarten in such a pleasant expectation. But this was a kindergarten, and when he was 7, I went through a very severe crisis because he wasn't ready for school. He wasn't absolutely not ready for school. The kindergarten time was about to over and he wasn't ready at all. He had barely started to use the sentences in his speech, but he got declension and conjugation confused. He was not totally capable to answer the simplest questions. How old are you? Where do you live? What is your name? He could get his name and surname confused. We were getting ready to the Vernix test, and he was able to answer 30% of questions using patterns more or less correctly, but he could barely understand himself. That is, when he pronounced I, it was unconsciously. It wasn't I like I, it was pattern. Just pattern. I want, I can, give me, like this. It seemed that his speech was developing. But anyway, he wasn't ready for school. That's why I found him a more appropriate, mild variant. Even before his graduation, I had managed to make a deal with a teacher who gathered the first form according to Zhokov's system. I told her everything honestly. We met. I showed Maxim to her and told her about his problems. She said that it was okay, that everything would be great, that I shouldn't worry, the system would be perfect for him. I was very afraid that she would change her mind, that we wouldn't get into this group, that the other parents would be against a special child. And by that time, I was waiting for the 3rd child, and I was very emotional. It was difficult. Very difficult, because I wanted to spend this time with Maxim. School is a very important period, and here I was pregnant again. But I guess I would lose my mind if Maxim was my only child because of the feeling of guilt that I owe him everything. And other kids gave me the opportunity to find more important tasks and to leave Maxim alone. And Maxim went to the first form. He was not ready at all, and he wasn't able to attend this class alone. During the first month, his dad was there with him. At first I was sitting with him at the lessons, but then I had a baby. Then his dad was sitting with him, my husband. It lasted for a month, but he couldn't work. And we began to look for a tutor. The teacher agreed with a heavy heart that a stranger would be present at the lessons. We checked several tutors, but none of them fitted. And then a young mother came. She also had a special kid, but he was in the kindergarten. She was free during the daytime, and she was a beam of light for us. She became friends with Maxim, and she became a part of our family, and she helped me with Misha, with my baby. And the saying is, every cloud has a silver lining. And since October, Maxim was studying with tutor. Of course, things became much better. And in general, at that period, there was a great breakthrough. And when he was 7.5, they started to study math. The Zhukov's method is all illustrative. Everything is just like Maxim likes. There is a huge screen. They don't have all those boring textbooks. They have a huge multimedia screen, marker boards with a lot of pencils, markers, and that's all. And they write on these boards with big letters. And as Maxim had been attending preschool education group in special center, he didn't have progress. Writing worksheets was a nightmare for him. He hated writing worksheets. He hadn't even learned to phrase how much he hated writing worksheets. And in this case, he gradually, with these markers, pencils, and he began to write. And he understood mathematics, as he used to be totally out of math. When we were passing disability test when he was 7, Maxim was already much better, and they didn't want to prove his disability for 2 years. They said, we will prove it for 1 year. And I began to cry, so I will have to do this all again. In 1 year, I was pregnant at the time. In a year I will be busy with other things, give it for 2 years, please. And they proved his disability up to 18 years. It just happened. They said, we see that you don't want your child to be disabled, that you don't intentionally talk down on him, that he really needs this help. So somehow they proved his disability up to 18 years. And we relaxed. We didn't have any medication. So they proved his disability, and it was an additional material help for us. The extra help will come in handy. I mean, we hadn't used anything, neither drugs nor anything. We had just passed this disability test before school, and when we had passed the medical commission before school, I guess it was Wechsler test. He hadn't been ready for it. A lot of parents of autistic children are afraid to pass Wechsler test. The children are not ready for it, especially when they have speech development problems, incomprehension of speech. A child simply doesn't know how to answer the specialist questions. He doesn't understand the question. That is, he has difficulties with perception of instructions, of verbal instructions. And even if the kids are able to answer a little bit to the questions concerning some general matters, at least something, the seasons of the year, how many ears do you have, how many legs the dog has, that is the simple questions like this. But the questions concerning some social behavior of a person, how to react in such situations, these will be too complicated questions for autistic children. And they tested his math skills, and it was nothing. He could only count up to 20, and Zhukov's group is a mathematical one. And I spent the whole September with him, and I bought him counting frame, and I was explaining him on sweets, and he understood. And he loved math, and he loved this Zhukov's group and his school, and it was great. I guess this is always to the therapies. We have also tried Atlas correction, we have tried osteopath, lots of things. We have contacted David through Skype. It didn't help. We have done tomatis in Moscow, one course, and there was no result. We have spent 100,000 for nothing. Besides, it was also quite expensive to live in Moscow. We lived in Thailand and it helped. So traveling to the seaside, living at the seaside, holding therapy, which is totally free, regular educational classes, according to the schedule, that he knows for sure. For example, I put a box in front of him and there is a jigsaw puzzle, some writing bricks, and he knows that he has to finish to be free. I think it's time to tell about infodiving, and the sad part is already over and the happy part begins.